Hi, good morning, everybody. How is everybody doing today? Good? All right. Thank you for coming to our talk. Just a little background. This is a sort of a sequel to last year's Squirrel presentation that Jason led so gracefully last year that really opened my eyes up, and really, I think we had a good dialogue, and so I reached out to him, and this is how the sequel kind of came about. So,
yeah. What we enjoyed was the discussion that spontaneously happened afterward, and that's what we're hoping to kind of get going here too.
Yep.
Because I thought it really helped people just connect and find out more and see like you're not alone.
So the goal of this is we're going to do a short presentation. It's not going to take up the full 75 minutes, but we do want to have that open dialogue. We want to have that, fire your questions away. We want them. Just a quick show of hands. How many people here classify themselves as neurodivergent? Okay. All right. And I'm assuming the rest of you guys are managed people who may be neurodivergent or just have coworkers who are? Yeah? Okay, cool. Excellent. This is exactly the audience we were looking for. So as we said, this is Squirrel 2.0, how to be and work with neurodivergent in IT. My name is Roger Herling. I am currently the Apple Jamf endpoint engineer from McGraw-Hill. I have roughly 20 plus years of IT experience, and more than 10 dedicated just to the macOS side. I am a reformed Windows admin, so
it's okay.
I was diagnosed with ADHD at the age of 19, so doing some math here, about 25 years or so. I've been officially dealing with this neurodiversity. So, and a fun fact about me, I am a huge Lego fan. In fact, I got Lego tattooed all over me. So, and
all right. Sorry. I'm Jason Stanford. I work at Lehigh University. I'm coming up almost on my 25th anniversary there. I set up one of the first Mac classrooms on campus there many years ago before OS 10 was a thing. I was not diagnosed until the mid-2000s, around my mid-30s. First it was with generalized anxiety disorder, and then 2 years after that it was ADHD, and before and after the meds was, oh, this explains a hell of a lot. And something I'll get into a little bit later was and I lost my train of thought. So good, this is a live demo, just like last year. So anyway, as I mentioned last year, early on in the pandemic, things weren't going great, other than I loved the work from home. That was fantastic. I came across that phrase, pills don't equal skills, and it's just like, what? Because I'd just been on meds. I had no idea anything about ADHD, and that kind of led me down this path of, and there was a lot more, this makes a lot more sense. And to cut it short, just one more fact, my wife wanted me to mention this. I actually have an IMDb page with one entry. In 2004, I was in an episode of the Forensic Files, not as a subject of the story. I didn't do anything wrong other than drive the poor producer absolutely nuts trying to give super accurate, detailed answers for every single question when he wanted the TV answer. So if they had outtakes, it'd be 20 times as long as the actual period I showed up. So.
Before we get into the nitty-gritty, just a couple of disclaimers, provisos. Number one, we are not doctors. We don't, or psychologists. We don't pretend to be. What we're going to be talking about are our personal experiences only. This is in no way affiliated with either of our employers. And last but not least, what works for us may not work for everybody. So, your
mileage may vary.
Your mileage may vary. So, another thing, we are touching on on areas of psychology, complex, nuanced. Bottom line, there are no silver bullets. There's no one fix for everybody. Right? So a little bit of our agenda today. We're going to cover what is neurodivergent. What does that term mean? All right? We're going to cover ADHD primarily. We're going to talk about the different types according to the DSM, which I'll talk about in a little bit. We're going to talk a little bit about executive function and how ADHD affects executive functions. We're going to discuss the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990. We're going to talk about what it is, what protections does it provide for people who are neurodivergent, and when and how to disclose to an employer if you need to request accommodations. Then Jason's going to talk about some tips for the neurodivergent, tips for managers and coworkers. We have some resources we share. We have a GitHub that we'll put up a slide at the end with some links to some resources for you guys. And then last but not least, we will definitely do our open discussion and Q&A. All right, so what is neurodivergent? Well, as you can see, it covers a lot. All right? The term came out of the autism awareness community in the mid-'80s. And typically, the neurodivergent is a non-medical umbrella term that describes people with variation in their mental functions and could include conditions such as ASD, autism spectrum disorders, or other neurological development conditions such as ADHD. As I said, we're mostly going to be focusing on ADHD here, and that's because most people with ADHD have some sort of comorbidity with some other type of dysfunction or disability, such as other learning disabilities, or some of us might be on the spectrum as well. So the official types and presentations. So ADHD can only be diagnosed by a professional. That means a psychiatrist or a psychologist, not a social worker. Sorry. Your master's degree in social work does not qualify you to diagnose this officially. So the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, 5th edition, referred to as DSM-5, describes 3 subtypes of ADHD. And I hope you're taking notes because they're really complicated. So the first one, predominantly inattentive. Ooh, yeah. Yeah. Second one, predominantly hyperactive. All right. And last but not least, the combined type. Ooh, yeah, that's real complicated stuff here. Some of the presentation of the inattentive type would be lacking attention to detail. All right. Difficulty focusing. Trouble listening. That's always a good one. Failing to complete tasks is a big one. Poor organizational skills. And for the record, that is Vice President Al Gore's office. That is Vice President Al Gore. So, just.
That's his inbox.
Yes.
Yeah.
So. I believe this is post-vice presidency, but I think this was during like the early 2000s. This picture. Yeah. So, next we have avoiding tasks that require sustained focus. Yeah, that's a good one. Losing of important items. Easily distracted. And last but not least, we can never forget forgetfulness. Okay.
I wasn't paying attention earlier. If I have all this, what do I do?
You want a duck? Yeah. Woo! Yay! Ducks for everybody. All right. The ADHD predominantly hyperactive and impulsive presentation. All right. Things like leaving their seat when expected to remain seated, blurting out answers, interrupting, struggling to stay quiet. I guess that kind of is interrupting. I don't know. Fidgeting and tapping of hands or feet. Trouble waiting their turn. Oops, sorry. Often on the go. I'm going ahead of myself on my own slides. Often on the go, and I'll sit still. Trouble waiting their turn. Talking excessively. Sorry. And feeling restless. All right. And then, of course, last but not least, we have the combined type. I didn't really want to put a slide together, so I just put that picture up. So, kind of encompasses it all, right?
That's, yeah.
The reality, though, is ADHD is way, way more complicated than the DSM makes it out to be. And it's some people, it's basically flawed, all right? There's a couple reasons for that. One, it's old, all right? This version of the DSM was published in 2013, all right? It's almost 2025, people, you know. It's about time for a new version. Second is it overemphasizes attention deficits very heavily. And what it doesn't do is it does not focus enough on executive function, self-regulation, and emotional dysregulation impairments. And we're going to go into a little bit more about what those executive functions are and what that means. The other thing is they're very male-biased criteria. Statistically, men are more likely to be diagnosed with ADHD than women. However, the predominance of it is probably closer to 50-50. Women tend to present symptoms differently. They don't typically present as hyperactive, so they're often missed in school. They often do well in school, but still have trouble focusing on other things. So
I think they will tend to mask a lot
yeah,
more.
they do tend to mask a lot of that as well.
Yeah.
And it does not address comorbidities. So what I mean by comorbidities are disorders that happen at the same time. They may not be necessarily caused by, but they tend to coexist within the same individual. So,
But for me, generalized anxiety disorder.
Exactly.
That's my conclusion.
for me, major depressive disorder, I have generalized anxiety, and I also have ADHD.
Yeah.
Right. Executive function. And it's a long paragraph, but this is one of the few slides I'm going to read verbatim. It's executive function describes a set of cognitive processes and mental skills that help an individual plan, monitor, and successfully execute their goals. The executive functions, as they are known, include attention to control, working memory, inhibition, and problem solving, many of which are thought to originate in the brain's prefrontal cortex. That's from Psychology Today. And as you can see by the little graphic that is being blocked by my head, and I do apologize, you can see that it affects everything. Executive function is your primary functions, all right? Those of us with ADHD, we have a dysfunctional executive function. So, and that word dis is going to come up a lot. The other thing is like impulse, where was I? Sorry, I'm losing my notes here. Emotional dysregulation. Talk about that. Emotional dysregulation tends to present as an emotional response that may seem excessive compared to the situation. Individuals with most emotional dysregulation may have difficulty calming down, avoid difficult feelings, or focus on the negative. So again, responses that may seem excessive compared to the situation. Can't tell you how many times I've overreacted to things at work, at home. My wife, my coworkers, they don't know what's going on. So, and it's all just because it's processed differently in my brain. Another emotional dysregulation, difficulty calming down. Once you get into that agitated state, it is very difficult to get out of it without assistance or without some sort of calming mechanism. For me personally, it's I take a break. I walk away.
Yeah.
Go lay down on the couch. Take the dog for a walk. Anything to kind of break that mental roller coaster, that mental merry-go-round that's going around in my head that's causing that excessive response.
There is a physiological aspect to that.
Yes.
You trigger the amygdala and other stuff. There's just brain chemistry. It's going to take time to process through. That's across the board.
Yep.
For everyone.
So this emotional dysregulation causes avoiding difficult feelings and situations. Those of us, me personally, I tend to avoid large crowds. I tend to avoid speaking in public. I tend to avoid, anything that I know is going to be a trigger for my ADHD. I try to avoid as much as possible. And this also includes in my job. Another big thing here, emotional dysregulation, focusing on the negative. The negative self-talk is a big problem for those of us who suffer from neurodivergent issues. Thinking we're not good enough. Why am I doing this? Why can't I get this right? Why can't I start this project? Why can't I finish this on time? All these things, this negative self-talk just builds and builds and builds and builds. And this is what tends to lead to other comorbidities like depression and anxiety disorders.
And a lot of times, it's like you know you're saying it and you're hearing it, but you're not paying attention to it, and it's just kind of this little voice in the background, and it kind of eats away at you.
And as I said before, it's really a core trait of ADHD, but it's not effective. It's not reflected in the DSM criteria. So again, another reason the DSM criteria is out. And probably the most common emotional dysregulation that those of us with ADHD experience is rejection-sensitive dysphoria, RSD. All right, it is a real thing, people. RSD causes sudden emotional outburst caused by real or perceived criticism or rejection. This is where that negative self-talk comes in. We've convinced ourselves in our brains by talking to ourselves so negatively that we're perceiving things that actually aren't even there. We think people are judging us based upon something that we judge ourselves on, but nobody else is. Right? Tend to withdraw socially. All right, low self-esteem. There's that negative self-talk we talked about. And also, there's that merry-go-round we talked about, rumination, overthinking, unable to let it go. It's constantly going through your head. And once again, none of this is mentioned in the DSM-5.
You may just say, this is the only dys that I think is a cool name, dysphoria. It just sounds sci-fi. I'll take that one. So.
Now let's move into the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990, otherwise known as the ADA. What is the ADA? Well, it's a law that prohibits discrimination based upon disability. Well, what kind of discrimination does it prevent? Well, firing, refusing to hire based on real or perceived disabilities, segregation, harassment. It requires covered entities to provide reasonable accommodations. We're going to discuss those in a little bit as well. And you might ask, what is a covered entity? That's a great question. Thanks for asking. A covered entity is any employer with 15 or more employees. So, sorry, those of you who work for the 3-person office, this doesn't apply to you. They can do whatever they want to you. You have no legal recourse, unfortunately. Well, you probably do, but you're not protected by the ADA as far as the government is concerned. The other thing it does is it requires accessibility for public accommodations. That means handicap access ramps, handicap parking spaces, elevators, listening devices, all that stuff. So whenever you go into a public space, you go to a movie theater, you can get a free listening device, right? You can get a free closed caption device. That's all hooked up to the system. And so that's all part of the ADA. The ADA is what manifested those things for the public to use. These are just a small list of the covered conditions. It's a lot. I'm not going to read them all off on there. So it does really cover a lot of things, from amputation to schizophrenia. Okay. As I mentioned, reasonable accommodations. Reasonable accommodations is a change or adjustment to a job or work environment that permits a qualified applicant or employee with a disability to participate in the job application process, to perform the essential functions of a job, or to enjoy the benefits and privilege of employment equal to those enjoyed by employees without disabilities. That's a mouthful, all right? What does it really mean? Well, what is a reasonable accommodation? That's a good question. It's acquiring or modifying equipment or devices, okay? That could be things like noise-canceling headphones for people who have ADHD. That could be things like privacy walls or working from home, that kind of thing. Actually, that's further down. Or for the blind, braille keyboards, seeing eye dog, a bed for your seeing eye dog, anything that can be considered part of that. Job restructuring. This is a big one. Working from home, being able to have a quiet workspace. These are all good job restructurings. Also, maybe you can limit your hours, the hours of work that you do. It might even mean limiting the amount of work you're given at a time. Right? And again, part-time modified work schedules. Another thing that can be a reasonable accommodation is reassignment to a vacant position. Maybe the position you're in doesn't really fit well with what you're doing, or maybe your supervisor doesn't necessarily work well with you. You can actually ask for a reassignment as a reasonable accommodation. This one really was very helpful for me in college. adjusting or modifying examinations, training materials, and policies. When I was in college, because I had a formal diagnosis, I was able to request note takers, where the school actually paid somebody in my classes to take notes that then they were presented to me completely anonymously. They did not know who they were taking notes for, so I did not have to disclose to anybody but the college itself. Also, modified examinations. I was able to take tests in distraction-free rooms because for me, and I'm sure a lot of you, I hear everything in the room. I hear everything right now. I hear that fan going. I hear people out in the hallway. I can hear people tapping their pens. I can hear people putting their water bottles down. These are all distractions for those of us. And it's because I lack the ability to tune those things out at will. Now, through years of therapy and training and medication and just figuring it out myself, it's less of a problem for me now than it used to be, but it was nice to have. And this also applies to the work situation as well. So, training materials and things like that and policies should be accessible to all. Another one, providing readers and interpreters. This is where those note takers came in. And making the workplace readily accessible and usable to people with disabilities. So this means this is your ramps, this is your accessible bathrooms, this is those types of things. So some more things some more accommodations you could request. And again, we talked about this, flexible work hours. Where possible, hard disconnects can be very important. I told my job this week, I'm not here. Don't talk to me about anything. Don't text me unless something emergency blows up. That's important. Remote options as needed, as we stated. I am very lucky to have secured a permanent full-time work-from-home job during the pandemic. My previous employer, who some of them are actually in this room right now, we were on site, the pandemic came, and then we all went remote. And I realized, oh wait, this is actually good for me. The other thing is sensory considerations that you can actually ask for. Fluorescent lighting. Those lights make noise, people. All right? I don't care what anybody says. They make noise, I can hear it. All right?
And sometimes the color is just off.
Yep.
Yeah.
Sometimes the chair that I'm sitting in is so uncomfortable, I can't focus on work. The orientation of my desk also. Am I facing somebody? Am I not facing somebody? Is somebody behind me? Is somebody looking over my shoulder? These are all factors that can affect neurodivergent people with, and can cause any number of situations to unfold. And employees may need noise canceling headphones, alternative seating choices, face away from passersby is exactly what I said. All right, great. All right, more accommodations. Oops, I forgot to put the bullet points on thing, but that's okay. So everything we've been talking about, consistent routines, also very important. We are not OCD, although some people with ADHD do have OCD. Me personally, I'm not OCD, but having a set schedule is very helpful. One of the best things that happened to me when I took my previous job was I was introduced to Scrum and the sprint system. At first I was terrified. I thought, oh my God, there's all these, people are judging me. What are points? What are stories? What is all this stuff? I don't know. Turns out it was actually a really good thing for me because I was able to put everything that I needed to do into a nice defined box. I had a set period of time to do it. And after that set period of time, I moved on to the next things. And if I didn't finish it, well, here's why I didn't finish it. These were the roadblockers. So
it almost sets like a memory of pacing.
Yep.
Like so that you kind of get used to this pace.
And even something as simple as my morning routine, right? I get up, take a shower. First thing I do is, depending on if the school's in session or not, I either drop my younger daughter off at the bus stop, and then I go get myself a coffee, and then I come back, let the dogs out. So there's steps that I do. Again, it's not quite to the level of OCD, but it does help me get into that mentality for the day to be able to get going. And again, the task management visual schedules, that's where, your JIRAs come in. That's where, your Scrum, Kanban boards, any of that stuff. while it may be overwhelming at first for the neurodivergent, is likely to actually help them in the long run, as long as you are patient with them, you teach them how to use it, and you don't judge them when they don't meet when they don't meet that list. Doesn't mean they're not doing their job, right? So, why are we talking about all of the ADA requirements? I'm going to tell you guys a story. As I said, I was diagnosed with ADHD at 19. This happened after I left high school and went to college for my first semester and ended up with a .87 GPA. Yeah, go me. Went from being a solid, good, B student by my senior year in high school to failing everything except for band. So, tuba. Tuba player.
Really?
So, yeah, band and marching band were the only two classes I passed. And actually, I phrase that. Somehow I passed group piano even though I stopped going to class for the last 6 weeks. So, I don't know how that happened. Bottom line, I went back home. I was confused and what was going on. And that's when I got my formal diagnosis. And that involved me going through some psychological testing, a lot of background. I had to provide all my school records from everything that my parents had at the time. And it's really kind of a process of elimination. They need to eliminate other things, and then they can focus, okay, does this apply to you? Great. Yeah, oh, you have ADHD. Congratulations. I started on Ritalin, switched over to Ritalin XR, switched over to, I've been on the gambit, right? Fast forward, a number of years down the road, I am working at an employer who shall remain nameless for reasons. And I have a boss that, how do I put this? I think micromanaging is too nice of a word. It was very much his way or the highway. It didn't matter if you had a better way to do it. It didn't matter if your brain couldn't follow the same steps and procedures in the same order that he did it in. He wanted it done his way. Again, also with the seating arrangements, we got new office space. He set up his desk facing mine, me facing away from him, so he could watch my screen, so he could see what I was doing at every second of the day. Right? This went on for a while, and it was very clear that he had it out for me. He didn't want me to be there. He thought it was a mistake to have hired me, thought that, he made a bad decision. Meanwhile, never missed a deadline. All my work was done on time. I was responsible for making 30 plus individual images for computer labs using SysPrep and Ghost 11, yay, as well as building the first Mac labs ever on campus using Deploy Studio. All right. Self-taught all of that. Didn't go in any certification classes for that. There wasn't a Deploy Studio class back then, right? Mm-hmm. So I was doing my work. My work was good. The only person who had a problem with my work was my boss. I started looking for another job. I was depressed. My wife was unemployed at the time. This was during the 2008 bubble. She ended up 99 weeks on unemployment in New York State. So, but I thought, well, if he fires me before this, we're done. I had a new daughter. I had an apartment that I could barely afford with the salary they were paying me anyway. So I didn't know what to do. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go down the disclosure route and see if I can get HR to help me. So I went to HR, and they said, oh, well, we need to see a diagnosis for you, and then we can provide you reasonable accommodations. I'm like, that's great. I lost my diagnosis. It was one piece of paper. I couldn't remember the name of the doctor who did it. My parents didn't have any of the records. Nothing. So I ended up having to pay out of my own pocket to go to another psychiatrist in town, get a new diagnosis, and then I was able to formally go and disclose and start requesting reasonable accommodations. Some of the accommodations I requested, noise-canceling headphones was one of them. Electronic note-taking software, those little pens that take your notes, things like that. But it was a tough situation to be in, and my boss never accepted it. Never thought it was real. I never thought that these things that I was requesting were necessary because, well, if I can do it, why can't you do it? Right? I distinctly remember one day we were in a meeting with HR, and I'll get into this a little while in the formal analysis, but part of this reasonable accommodation process, when you formally disclose to an employer, you will generally have regular reoccurring meetings with human resources and your supervisors to discuss, are your needs being met? In one of these said meetings, my boss asked the question, so how long are we going to have to do this for? To which the HR rep said, forever. So, it's not easy. Hey, look, it's Squirrel. All right. So, to disclose or not, all right? Why did I disclose, all right? So there's several questions you need to ask yourself before you talk about disclosing to an employer or coworkers or anything like that. Why? In general, why do you feel you have to disclose? Is it for your own good? What to do? What do I expect to get out of disclosing? Am I looking for accommodations? What kind of accommodations am I looking for? Am I looking for job adjustments? Am I looking for, noise canceling headphones? Am I looking for a different office space? When should I do this? Well, for me, in my story, I did it when my job was in jeopardy, right? When I thought that I was going to be homeless with a newborn daughter, and I had no other choice, all right? Or another thing is with the when, has somebody started talking about your performance? Has somebody brought something up to you in a meeting that you think, okay, well, maybe I should probably tell them I have ADHD so they understand why that happened? And last is, who do you tell? And this is where it kind of comes down to two fronts. You have two options when it comes to disclosure. You can go the formal route by talking to HR, or you can go the informal route, which is just having a discussion with your supervisor, your coworkers, and explaining it in the terms that you're comfortable explaining it in. You don't necessarily need to use the words ADHD or anything like that if you're not comfortable. Oh, look, another squirrel. Sorry. The secret squirrel, by the way. Secret squirrel. This tells you how old I am, by the way. So let's talk about the official disclosure to HR process. Well, it can be a long, drawn-out process and expensive, as I mentioned before. Most employers will require an official diagnosis. This, however, your mileage may vary depending on your employer, how open they are to things. I've also found that institutes of higher education tend to be more receptive to these kinds of disclosures and have way more ability to help. Because most of those higher education schools also have a department that deals with students with ADHD or different learning disabilities. So they may get that department involved. The other thing with the formal diagnosis is to remember, most psychiatrists don't take insurance. It's a shameful fact these days where they'll take insurance for med visits, they'll take insurance for therapy sessions, but when it comes to writing out a formal diagnosis, because of the amount of work involved, they will most likely not take your insurance because they will not get compensated for their time properly to do all the testing and the writing of the diagnosis, all the stuff that's required for it. Once you're able to get that formal diagnosis, all right, as I said, must be from a psychiatrist or a psychologist, no social workers. You're going to provide that diagnosis to your human resources person. Again, your mileage may vary. There might be some forms you got to fill out. There might be different people you have to talk to. But bottom line, the only two people in your company who need to know about your disability is HR and your direct supervisor. Nobody else. They're not allowed to talk about it. They're not allowed to tell anybody else without your permission. So that's one good thing. Next in the step is meetings with and without your supervisor. So when I went through my formal disclosure process, I had initial meetings with HR. They went over the process with me, what I would need. how to go about it. After I submitted my diagnosis, they met with me alone to say, well, what do you want to ask for? So I didn't have to say all this in front of my supervisor, who is very clear, was trying to intimidate me out of the job, right? So again, this is where you're going to discuss accommodations and expectations. Once you have that initial meeting, then you're going to have your meeting with your supervisor where that official disclosure is going to happen. They're going to cover those accommodations and expectations with your supervisor. You will agree to whatever you agree to. In my case, it was some classes on project management that didn't really do anything for me, some headphones and some other things, right? And then, as I said before, regular follow-up meetings to make sure that your accommodations, that your needs are still being met at regular intervals. The next type, as I said, is the off-the-record disclosure. All right. Probably the best thing. It doesn't require a formal diagnosis. So, you know, if you have a social worker or a therapist you see, and they're like, "Oh, well, you obviously have ADHD," you probably have ADHD. You don't necessarily need to go through that whole process. If you have a manager who is open to feedback and open to discussion, this is very important. It is also more private because you've eliminated HR from the picture. You only have to talk to one person. You only have to talk to that coworker or that supervisor and tell them. So for years I was ashamed of my diagnosis. For years I hid it. For years I didn't want to tell anybody about it because I was afraid of being judged for it. And Jason will go into a little bit more about that later. It's also much less threatening for the manager as well, for the supervisor. Yeah, I have to believe that when my boss was called into HR with me for that meeting, he felt like I had gone over his head or that I had done something to harm him, you know. So this less threatening, it helps, right?
Yeah, especially if you have a good working relationship with this person.
Exactly.
You really can talk to them. It really helps that along.
Yeah. This informal diagnosis can also be used to decide if a formal disclosure is needed, right? So if it doesn't go well, you might need to get HR involved now. All right. If you thought your manager or your coworkers were going to be receptive to this, and it turns out they aren't, that might be the time to either A, find a new job, B, go to the HR, or C, all the above. Right? I'm now going to hand over to Jason. There you go.
All right. First of all, I know last time I was talking to you, am I talking loud enough for everyone to hear? Okay. All right, good. So, I'm just going to go over a little bit about ADHD just to kind of help, especially people who maybe aren't familiar with it. I'm not going to go into incredible detail here. There's going to be some little gags hidden in there too. So, some myths. It's not real. It's a fake. And as I was writing my notes last night, I found on YouTube Dr. Russell Barkley, who's one of the big researchers in the field. He's been doing, in fact, he was involved with some of the earlier DSMs. He posted a video exactly on that subject where his answer was pretty much, no, that's not true at all. It is not a myth. In fact, they've been finding research papers back to the 1750s and 1770s. They don't use the term ADD or HDD, but they're describing it. So, you know, the medications are dangerous or addictive, or they change your brain, or they give you a competitive advantage somehow. And no, there's been studies on that too. If you don't have ADHD symptoms and you take, you know, Adderall or something, not going to do anything for you.
It is very heavily abused. We wholeheartedly agree that you know, Adderall is abused by college students everywhere still.
Yep.
But yeah.
You know, it's just an excuse. There's an unfair advantage. I assume that can also tie back to your experience with requesting accommodations and so forth. That's not real. You're just being lazy.
Show of hands, how many of you have been told that you were lazy in your life?
Yep. That doesn't stick with you. You don't take that to heart at all.
That doesn't help with negative self-talk.
No, not at all. Not at all. I guess I am. You know, that only affects kids or boys.
Little boys specifically. Yeah.
Yeah.
Those little hyperactive boys running around.
Yeah.
That's a childhood problem. You outgrow that.
Yeah.
No, you don't.
Could also just be an energetic kid. People with a high IQ can have ADHD.
It's actually the opposite.
Yeah. I've not actually encountered this one. I don't know if I just, said something bad about myself there. I don't know. I've not run across that one. It's not a challenge. You can choose to not act like that, which I always think of as, have you tried not having ADHD? Or have you tried not being depressed? Have you tried, that's what I say in my head. Have you tried not being an amputee?
Why didn't you just pick that piece of paper up? Why do you walk by it? I don't know.
And then, emotional dysregulation has nothing to do with that. It's just, are you distracted all the time or something? And especially if you go into reading about it, emotional dysregulation comes up in all the research. And then it was actually, it was not renamed by private equity when they were going from ADD to ADHD. Sorry, I can't resist putting my little bits in there. This, I came across, again, this is, I believe the first one is, again, a Dr. Russell Barkley, who's really interesting, but he was calling it he's been describing it more as an intention deficit disorder, not attention. He's not describing a medical diagnosis with that term. It's sort of his working term, but he uses that as a way to, as a helpful way to frame a persistent challenge with ADHD, the inability to further goals with timely action. Time blindness, we've heard of that probably, or experienced it. Then another one I came across recently was they were using the framing it sort of like your brain's GPS, executive functioning. Sorry, I should have mentioned this is about the executive functioning part at the top, or executive challenges. GPS is a system for guiding and directing you to somewhere. If you have that challenge, your thing, you don't have that system, or it's not working, or quite right, or it's, if you remember, the early GPS would direct you over to the middle of the river, or at least the consumer GPS. And then we have time blindness, which I believe that's probably a fairly universal hallmark. Now or not now, or the answer, how long will it take? 5 minutes. Everything will take 5 minutes. Another good example of this was this presentation, doing this presentation, especially last week. I knew the date was coming up. I knew it's this week, and intellectually, yes, it's this week, and it's not that week. And then last week, I was actually looking at the calendar and went, oh, wait, that's next week.
Yeah, we should probably
What?
start working on this,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Whoa, wait. And then, but it's like I can know it, but not feel it, or it's hard to describe. So it's not like you don't understand the concept of time. You just don't feel it. Like, it doesn't mean anything until boom,
Right.
you're on.
And that goes back to the I'm sure you guys have all seen the videos and everything that hit your feeds and all that stuff about, executive function and time blindness and all that stuff. But it really is that dopamine hit that really helps motivate those of us with ADHD. It is that time crunch. So as that impending deadline gets closer and closer and closer, I'm creating more dopamine in my head. That's helping me focus more and more and more. So it's one of the reasons that every single term paper I wrote in college was written within 48 hours of its due date. And I'm happy to say I got mostly A's and B's on them. So,
and it never leads to burnout.
yeah. Now, granted, little side story here. When Jason and I first started working, we started doing regular Zooms to talk about this. I think we got off topic pretty much every single Zoom except for like the last three of them. We ended up just chatting for an hour on random stuff because, we knew it was too far off, right?
And we were using kind of a bit of as a co-working session.
Yeah, but we also used it because we were on that call. it motivated us to both, use that time to research. So sometimes our calls were just silence, right? He was there on camera, I was there on camera, and we're just doing research, or we're editing slides, or we're doing something like that. Just knowing that that other person who's relying on you is there is also giving you that dopamine hit.
Yeah. It's they use the term body doubling a lot of times for that type of work, and I've even seen Discord channels and other, open places for people to show up for that. I've made a list of some of the various strengths about ADHD. This is actually something like going back to the negative self-talk. I have a lot of trouble accepting some of these, like I don't really have this, or I don't know if I do. To compare myself. So, creativity and genius or inventive thinking, thinking outside the box. Drive, hyperfocus, and persistence. Once you get us going on something, good luck stopping us for that.
For those who are not in the know, hyperfocus is our superpower. That is what gets stuff done, and it gets stuff done right, and it gets stuff done right, quickly.
Just
and
don't
right.
interrupt.
Yes.
Hyperfocus.
Yes. We'll get to
God.
that. We'll get to that.
Then you will see the emotional dysregulation. You will get a demonstration of that.
Yep.
Resilience and adaptability. Multitasking ability. I actually have a question about the multitasking. I sometimes think of it time slicing, like just rapid switching, multitasking.
I currently have 5 projects going simultaneously right now.
Yeah.
So.
But you can also, with the working memory, sometimes you lose track of which stack things are going, and problem-solving skills, strong intuition. Some of these things in my head tied together, like the creativity, intuition, problem-solving skills. A lot of times I use the word or think of the word gist. Like sometimes you just get the gist of something that's been described. Like, oh, okay, I get it. Or and sometimes the answer just comes out. Yes, an enthusiasm for technology. This is an apropos conference for that. I have definitely found in the neurodivergent community and ADHD that there is a lot of empathy and compassion and advocacy, and there's next one, the strong sense of fairness, standing up for others and not taking any guff. Sense of humility, it probably related to negative self-talk a little bit. There's probably some balance with that.
Imposter syndrome.
Definitely, yes. Definitely spontaneity or impulsivity. Pick your depends, context dependent. Humor, yes. That's a thing. Contagious motivation.
Yes.
Yes.
Dark humor absolutely does count. Yes.
It has the word humor, so yeah. And punctuality. Oh no, not punctuality.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's definitely not one of our
Yeah.
strengths.
Yeah. So now this is gonna be coming from a guy who's not a supervisor. I'm trying this. My wife, who has been a supervisor for years, reviewed my work. So start communication. This is one from my personal experience, and something that will come up a little later is communications. There tend to be a lot of forwarded email chains where maybe one person or another was or was not included in a CC or BCC, and then I'm looking at this thing, hey, can you do this? And you're like, no, I can't even read this. I'm not reading this. Like, I can't unpack this, and I'd literally have to pull it out, diagram it, copy paste, try to put a timeline back together and figure out what the heck's going on. And at that point, I'm just like, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not gonna go through this. Just tell me the problem. So, bullet points, please. It's just straightforward bullet points, not giant blocks of text. There is, I don't know if it's universal across the ADHD, but there is an aspect, like for me especially, I don't read left to right, top to bottom. My eyes don't scan. I start just going around. I'm looking for a pattern. Sometimes I'm
looking
circling
for keywords,
around.
patterns, things that I pull.
It is not the shortest path to get through.
That's how I read all of my white papers and technical documents. Is I'm picking out the keywords to see. Okay, well, I need to focus on this paragraph or this paragraph or this paragraph.
And especially if I can use a find function on a thing and just quick highlight okay, that showed up, that showed up, that showed up, and so forth. So when I see like the big block of text, it's just like, don't want to do it. For myself, I always have to sort of diagram things out, even if it's sloppy or I don't use it. I'm usually just, and for the last couple of years, I've just been using pencil and paper. I just start pulling out, or if I have a whiteboard handy, I'm just trying to sort of build a shape in my head of the structure. What the heck are we talking about? How does this fit together? How does this thing relate to that thing? And is this a subset of that? A lot of directed graphs things. Positively reinforcing feedback. And that can just be as simple as, if I've put a bunch of extra effort on something to solve it above and beyond what was needed, but was actually super helpful and saves everyone else time. If as a supervisor notice that, I don't need a huge amount of stuff, just like, hey, I saw you did that, thank you.
Yep. Simple thank you is all it needs. I don't need an award. I don't need you to blast it on, to an all employee email. Just thank you. I noticed you did a good job.
About 6 years ago, there was a new lab going in. I was asked to help. It turned into 80-hour weeks for 4 weeks, and it wasn't even a department I supported. And no one said anything after that. And it was just like, really? Not even, hey, thanks. Not that I'm carrying any baggage around with that. That one, here's one. So this, especially if you're visualizing rewards and positive outcomes, if you're someone, especially if you're good and naturally good at thinking that way, it would help us, because that's something, at least especially for me, I don't do that. It's hard, and sometimes even just hearing the word goals pisses me off. It's like, I don't know what the hell that...
This also goes to that thank you, by the way. It can be a thank you email. I don't have to hear it from your mouth. Just put it in an email.
It's like, I saw that. Thank you. All right. All right. Dopamine hit right there. Being open to discussing impediments. Like sometimes letting someone just come to you, maybe talk at you. Like, these are the things that frustrate me. And sometimes in the middle sentence, like, I got it. Wait, no, I figured it out. Thank you. But not feeling like, you're on the phone, you're distracted. You're like, no, I don't have time. We usually try not to interrupt people too much because we hate being interrupted. But please keep meetings brief. Maybe with an agenda. You hit that 20-ish minute
that's
mark.
That's universal. It has nothing to do with ADHD.
Okay.
Just keep your meetings brief, people.
I just know for myself, it's like, if it's like my team meeting, I can make it to about 20, 25 minutes. And if nothing is applied to me, I just start working other things and I'm kind of listening. If it's one of those open-ended meetings where all the teams can chime in and you could be there for an hour or so, it's just like, I can't. This is a big one. This comes back to things like negative self-talk, should statements, and I better read this.
You should be able to do that. Why can't you?
Yeah. Should statements lead you to focus on how things should be, and it tends to be like taken as even internalized as severe self-criticism, and sometimes that will lead to resentment. And how's that productivity once you get that going? Probably not that good. That is a big one, and it sneaks up. And even for you yourself talking about yourself, if you can sort of be mindful of that and catch it and change that language, it can actually help a bit. Okay, and I'll see we're getting close, so I'll speed it up. Asking for clarification, be open to having people approach you, say like, I didn't quite get what you're asking, or that big block of text you sent with the instructions, what's the important bit in here? Or do you have a diagram or bullet points or something?
And this doesn't necessarily mean that we weren't listening in the meeting when you maybe explained or in the first place. It's like, We just need that reinforcement, that clarification to make sure we understood it the first time.
And one, challenge for me, especially still in meetings, but especially when I was in school before diagnosis, was someone will say something like, Press will say something, oh, that's interesting, and 10 minutes later, wait, what did we just talk about? Or they just gave the assignment, I'm like, oh crap, I just missed that. Not being angry, like, well, you should have written that down, or why didn't you hear that? It may take 30 seconds to clarify that. Active listening skills, there are tons of videos on this, and by active listening, it's basically put your computer or phone down, turn to the person, listen. And it doesn't mean passive listening. Sometimes it's just like, okay, all right, yep. Something that just be sort of nonverbal, but your nonverbal language, body language.
Because we are aware of your body language, whether
we
you
will
are
pay
aware
attention.
of it or not.
You turn away, or something like that. You look distracted, or like you don't want to be there. There's going to be all right, okay.
And there's that perceived rejection, that perceived
involved,
thing that may not necessarily be real, but we think it might be.
Yep. It's like, I don't want to, obviously I'm bothering you, I don't want to bother you with that. So it is a skill, and it takes some practice, especially if you've not come across that phrase before. This one for me, especially before I had the remote work, the building I was in, it was an open plan. There were student teams in and out all the time. My office had a lovely scenic view of the two restrooms across the hall with the doors going ka-chung, 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 flush. The HVAC system was over the head, the fluorescents. I just have a question. Or me hearing the printer across the room, someone opened the tray. All right. And in the middle of trying to build an image, or deploy something, and come back and go,
this is the quickest way to break a person with ADHD's hyperfocus.
Yes.
And will almost instantly send them into a spiral of something. Maybe rejection, maybe...
especially with executive functioning, the limited working memory, smaller stack, I guess you could say, if you want to put it in programming terms. You might be brainstorming, getting this thing going, and all of a sudden, boom, I lost the train of thought where that was going, and it could be hours until you get back to that.
Could be days. I can't tell you the number of times I've remembered something randomly that I was thinking about 5 days ago.
Yep.
Oh.
This was one I learned from the Inflow, which is a learning service and an app, from their co-working Zoom sessions back during the pandemic, was them saying breaks are a part of work. Take breaks. And we were using the Pomodoro technique, 25 minutes on a task, 5-minute break. And even if it's just a few minutes, stand up, move around, turn, get a snack, make, something. They're very important because you can over-hyper folks and burn yourself out, This is one, I haven't come across this specifically in literature. This is something like I really wish happened. Like, I've lost every year weeks and weeks of vacation time. I just, people say, well, just take your vacation. And it always feels like, so I just do a couple days here or there. I always feel like if I'm gonna go, it takes a lot of effort to figure out where to go and what to do, and then to relax. It's not like I can't just get up and go. It's this whole thing. And as soon as there's a text or email or just something that pops up that's work related, boom.
Yep.
It's like, it's an emotional dysregulation. Like, fine, I will just do all the work this week. Great. Okay. I was never in a position where I had someone that could just say, so-and-so's got the coverage to do that, and I didn't know how to ask that. That's on me. But so if you're our supervisor, if someone is ADHD neurodivergent, if you could just say, hey, you need to take vacation, we got you covered, don't worry about it, unless something's really hitting the fan and we're absolutely stuck and can't do something, whatever, but we're not, turn it off. We don't need to hear from you. Go away. Yeah. I'm sure this is probably like your supervisor there, Roger, was something
Yep.
like that. Yep. So yep. Working with people. I'm just going to kind of jump forward a little bit. So yep. Clearer communication, shorter stuff. So loud. Yep. So if you can kind of set up the situation so we could do what we do best, you're going to get the things you need probably more. Yep. And this one, I forget. This one I'll kind of skip over now, but I just came across that the other day. I mentioned of it. It's apparently universal across all people. They've done the experiments where you can add some pressure and stuff to motivate people to work, and then you hit a tipping point, and boop, it goes off. And with ADHD, it's just a slightly different position.
We'll make sure we'll make sure the video is linked in the in the resources.
All right.
Yeah, this was a quote I found from Albert Einstein that I love, and I think it applies to those of us who are neurodivergent. Everybody is a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it's stupid. So if you try to make me do things your way, and I can't, I'm going to think I'm stupid, even though I might be able to do it my way and get to the same result. So, and with that, the next slide. We're going to open it up to the floor. We got about 14 minutes left. Is there any questions, comments? We really want people to talk. All right. So this hand first.
You mentioned some resources, I think. Do you have like a slide with some resources, or are you looking for us to interject resources?
Yeah, so we the next slide is going to be a link to a GitHub page that will be updated. We will be updating, for the next couple of days, adding some resources into links. One of them being like Attitude Magazine, things like that. Some tools that maybe work for some of us, that kind of thing.
Could I share two that I've found helpful?
Sure.
So
I'm also open to any kind of pull request. You want to send me a pull request on it and add something to it? Please do.
Okay. Yeah. One is the channel called How to ADHD on YouTube.
Yeah.
Another one is by Russell Barkley that you mentioned earlier.
Mm-hmm.
It's called Taking Charge of Adult ADHD.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yeah, these are all good.
I think there's another one, Dr. Dodson. He's also another researcher. I will add something there. But the Attitude Magazine I found, I keep more and more over time, I keep going back and it's like, okay, they got an article on everything.
Yeah, and what's funny is that the Attitude Magazine really kind of started more geared towards the children, like towards ADHD
like
children.
25 years ago.
As things have progressed, they've many more articles about adult ADHD and ADHD in the work environment.
First of all, I just want to say this is just such an important discussion to be having, and it is kind of amazing, kind of sitting in this room and going, okay, you just. First, I've been diagnosed with quite a few things. My parents basically said he has enough after anxiety and depression, so they really didn't bother with the ADHD at that point. But yeah, first of all, seeing that
overachiever. That's right.
Never got good grades, but I was able to get by. Seriously though, just kind of being able to not just identify with, but also not realizing half of these things aren't just personal struggles. Half of them aren't just like something that's, maybe, there are comorbidities, but not necessarily, hanging off of, an extant depression, for example.
Yeah.
There are just straight up difficulties that we have because we have, strengths in other places.
Yeah. I think especially the last 4 or 5 years, there seem to be so many more resources available, different channels.
Definitely more of an acceptance.
I feel that
out
there's
there.
more empathy in the air, kind of, for lack of a
and
better
I think a lot of
phrase.
it has to do with the schools changing over from reading, writing, and arithmetic to more SEL learning, social emotional learning, and I think that's also helped as well.
Okay.
So.
It's a flag on the play.
Box down. All right.
Okay, yeah, as Dave said, thank you for this presentation. Jason said something almost in passing about dealing with, like, talking to people and they're not checking in with you, or they're like looking, whatever. They're not active listening. And you say, well, you start to get the mindset of, well, I'm sorry to bother you. I'm sorry to bother you. If I had a nickel for every time I apologized.
Yes.
We
So
would
if you
be-
start hearing sorry,
we-
sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you should talk to my wife because, are you okay? Is everything okay? Is everything okay? Is everything okay?
We would be having this conference in, somewhere other than, somewhere else, somewhere where everything is just, whatever anybody would need. But my question is, like if you have a team member, full disclosure, I have a lot of these things. I'm in recovery, and so I'm very hyper aware of people who have anxiety, or people who have, like I can walk on a bus.
You can feel like a
and
buzz.
Yeah, you can
and
feel
within-
it.
within
It's
5
palatable.
seconds,
Yeah.
I know who is the most anxious and
Yeah.
ever. And if some of them are on my team, there's no right answer to this, but interrupting someone that has ADHD obviously can derail them for a long period of time. But there are times during you have to interrupt, or that you're
Yes,
dependent
yeah.
on that. And there's no right answer to this. It
Yeah.
could be 50 different ways. But in your two experiences, if you're working on something, if you're deploying, an image to a lab that you have to get done, and yet you also have 3 other projects that involve 5 other people, and they're coming to you with updates or something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, what are the best practices, if there are best practices?
Communication. Communication is probably the most important thing. A prime example, my current employer, my current supervisor, had an issue with me, interrupting in meetings and in talking over him, or what he perceived was me talking over him, which was really just me expressing my opinion or sharing my thoughts because they're in my head. I need to get them out. If I don't, they go bye-bye.
Yeah.
So, and it really came down to, we just had a nice, good half-hour conversation about it. It's like, I absolutely am not trying to step on you. I don't want it, don't take any offense to this. Again, likewise with a fellow coworker who might be neurodivergent, the same thing really applies. Just that open dialogue, I think, really does
Are you
wonders.
are you asking maybe like what can someone with ADHD do to help meet halfway back to?
No, more so just, I don't know, because if you have an open discussion with that person, then you kind of know.
Okay.
But even if you do, there's always like, well, how do I get this person's attention without derailing them? for the
Ask
rest
them.
of the day?
Pomodoro.
Ask them.
No.
Yep,
Yeah.
that's the bet.
Yeah.
Everyone's different. Everyone's going to need a different solution.
Yeah.
Ask that person.
Box. We need the box.
Oh yeah.
Throw the box.
Oh no, you have 2 things I could pick.
Yes. Ask the person. Don't ask like, hey, what can I do about this person? No, talk to that person, because if that person tells you what to do, what works for them, they're going to be more open to when you do that and be able to like respond the way that you want them to, and they want themselves to react. Yeah. Don't say, hey, what works for you, and then apply it to other people, because
Yep.
all of us are
And you know
different.
what? And also don't be upset if you don't get it right the first time.
Yeah. And,
Yep.
and also stuff stops working after a while. So just keep checking in and say, hey, I noticed this isn't working anymore. What can we try next? And just be open to communicating and checking in, and yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Some back there.
We're getting to the back of the room. All right.
I would say a good starting point too is just to say, hey, when you get a minute, can you come tell me about this? Kind of put the power in their hands, because, like you said, that I would struggle with it. Like, I think like a typical person would take the minute to finish up, or they would, hey, give me a second, I'll finish this. But I may personally not say that or even think of that. But if you just say, hey, when you get a chance, come to me, then I know I can finish up the 2 minutes it takes me to get in a good headspace for anyway. So.
Yeah. I know the one thing my wife and I've kind of worked over the pandemic, worked from home, is finally I was just kind of getting her to come in, not scare the bejesus out of me, come behind, but just kind of going, just a gentle, like, can I have a sec? And I might be like,
Yeah,
give me
my
5
wife
minutes.
has come to now texting me to say, hey, can I come see you, before she barges into my office. Now, if I get my children to do that, that'd be great, but one step at a time.
Yeah.
Bat in the back, it looks
Oh.
like. Then we'll get it back up front here.
Do you have any resources that for supervisors regarding the prevalency of substance abuse in ADHD communities? Because a lot of times, work stress and life stress of being neurodivergent.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. I'll see if I can find some and put it up on the GitHub, and just for everybody, that's you want to take a snapshot of that. But yeah, that's one thing we didn't address in this talk, which is a lot of undiagnosed ADHDers self-medicate, and they don't always self-medicate with legal medication. It's sad that that's the case, but because the stigma around
You might be standing
these
in the way.
neurodivergent disorders. Oh, sorry, if I'm standing in front of the slide here. It makes it hard for a lot of people to be able to come forward and talk about it. Even and there are still people out in this world who don't think therapy is helpful in any way, shape, or form, or have been raised in families or communities where they're shunned if they have if they have to go see a therapist. Ooh, what's wrong with them? But yeah.
Turns out it's no big deal.
Therapy's great.
Yeah, they listen.
I think there was a comment earlier about how there's greater empathy for this now, and I think if you have family or friends or people at work who don't know about the condition, it helps if they know someone or that has it, and it helps them relate to it. But my 9-year-old nephew was diagnosed with ADHD last year, and he hung out with me for a week, and I saw firsthand as an adult what it's like for a child to be like the hyperactive type of ADHD, and I absolutely saw a night and day difference when he was on his meds and when he was not. And I had to think of some strategies to help him stay focused. I mean, watching a movie with him at night, I saw him squirming in his seat, could not sit still. He was on the floor, on the couch, on the floor, all over the place. It was kind of just funny to see that, but I have a lot more sympathy now for what it must have been like for my own parents and the other adults in my life when I was a kid to know what that's like, and it's great that his parents are dealing with that, because I'm sure they know other people in their jobs that have that, and I think my sister has more empathy for me having dealt with her crazy brother.
Especially if you can impart some routines, get it, to get some of the basics down, or just some skills, coping skills early on.
Well, I didn't mention this earlier, but throughout my childhood, I was misdiagnosed with various things. I mean, this was the 80s, people. They didn't, I wasn't displaying the typical hyperactive symptoms. So I was a classic underachiever. My personal favorite one is that I hated my parents, and that's why I wasn't doing my homework. So, the awareness is really helping.
And there's a YouTube channel that I saw that I don't know if you'd mentioned. I don't know if it's on your resources, but there's this family, the Holderness family, Kim and Penn Holderness. He has ADHD, she does not, and he's also a brilliant musician. They were on The Amazing Race a couple of seasons ago, and they have like 10 years worth of videos of just like what life is like with ADHD, and they also just published a book called ADHD is Awesome, which has the squirrel on it, and that's been a great book because he's a hilarious writer, and they both have these anecdotes about what life, like everyday life, is living with ADHD. They discuss the DSM diagnoses, the stigma attached to it, and how to like get help and resources.
And see, back when I was diagnosed, all I had were books, and so the first book I ever wrote was a book called Driven to Distraction. And I can't remember who wrote it. Caldwell, thank you. Then it's been revised several times over the years, so you could definitely find an updated revision of that. But that really helped me just really personalize everything. It's like, oh my God, that's me. You mean all this stuff that happened to me for the last 18 years of my life? It wasn't my fault.
Yeah.
And a lot of that guilt just went.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. The DSM has been updated to the technical revision. DSM-5 TR in 2022, and it addresses a lot of those issues.
So we got 47 seconds.
Someone over there.
Quick.
I just had a question about when it comes to formal disclosure. I don't know if you would know this or if it's a case-by-case basis, but would a prescription to a certain drug potentially work as a formal diagnosis?
No, as far as I know, no. Because, family pediatrician or your family physician can prescribe,
Yeah.
Ritalin or some sort of stimulant drug for you. So no, it does have to be formally from a doctor of psychology or a psychiatrist.
Got it.
So, well, thank you very much, guys. Feedback, thank you.